The collision of art and commerce in the unscripted space was recorded live during the 2023 SPADA conference. Some portions of the discussion may have been removed due to copyright or commercial sensitivity.
Screen Wellington is sponsoring this session, which is the collision of art and commerce in the unscripted space. So it's my job to introduce our speaker. So many of you in this room know Jon recently became a resident of Wellington. He'd visited a number of times over the years and decided that it was good enough to call it home. But he's no stranger to these shores. Originally, he was a big part and a showrunner on The Amazing Race. He's also been doing Gordon Ramsay's Uncharted, amongst many other things, and he's an Emmy Award winning producer. So he's fantastic talent to have on our shores, and Jon is very, very keen to give back and to make sure that the New Zealand community has the best opportunities to create fantastic unscripted work, whatever that may be. So we're very excited to have Jon in New Zealand and to be running these sorts of sessions. So I'm sure there's lots of pearls of wisdom you will get from Jon today. So please welcome to the stage Jon Kroll, who is the producer from Avocado Entertainment.
Thank you, Mark. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Jon Kroll toku ingoa. Niara te mihi mahana kia koto. My first time. I'd like to start with a quote. It's a quote for anyone here ever see Casablanca? Yeah, you'll know this one. Captain Renault says to Rick, "Why in the world did you come to Wellington?" And Rick says, "For the weather." And Captain Renault says, the weather is shit in Wellington, and Rick says, "I was misinformed." I'm happy to be here in Wellington, whether or not. Casablanca is a wonderful example of art and commerce colliding in a beautiful way. It's a wonderful film. It made a lot of money, even in its day. It was a hit when it was released, contrary to things like Citizen Kane that were bombs when they were released. And but it's not so easy usually to combine art and commerce in a way that makes us all happy and makes our partners that are financing our projects happy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In America, the emphasis is overly on commerce. You have to completely be supported by a paying network who wants you to get a lot of eyeballs on it. Since I've been here, I've been introduced to the amount of public money and support that is given to content creators, which is wonderful. However, sometimes if you're looking at bringing your projects to the global marketplace, it can create an overemphasis on projects that may not be as commercial, but they may be more artistically worthy. And how can we have both? And I believe in the and life, okay? I want to live in Wellington and make TV all over the world, and I'm trying to do that right now. So I want to talk to you about how you can make the shows you want and get a lot of people to watch them and make them in ways that your buyers will be super happy. So that's what we'll talk about today. Our agenda today, and sorry I did not add the M-E at the end of that. I have to learn the spelling still. Our agenda today is part 1 is art, part 2 is commerce, part 3 is questions. Please think about your questions, and we will get to those shortly. If you don't have questions, Mark will ask me questions to fill the time and make it look like it was interesting. All right, so some ground rules. We're talking about TV here. We're not talking about feature films. TV is loosely defined as anything you watch through your screen, not really games and stuff like that, but content you're watching through your various streams. And we're really talking about the commercial marketplace, not government or public funded programming. We're talking about stuff that is dependent upon advertising or subscriber dollars, so you have to attract eyeballs. And we're really focusing on what kind of content can you bring to the types of buyers who can give you money. One-stop shopping, ideally. So if you bring a project to Netflix and they want it, they don't want you to have other partners that have other rights. They want the whole thing. It's going to change a little bit as the streamers sort themselves out, and there may be more openness to partnerships, but it's been very protectionist lately. And the American and the international American-based buyers typically have not wanted you to come with other money or other partners. They want it all if they want the show. So we're gonna focus on those buyers who want it all and are willing to give you all the money to make your show. That's our emphasis. So part one, art. Let's, what the hell is art? I don't know. It's subjective. It's what you think is quality content. It's what you want to make to express yourself creatively. And I think that one of the things we'll talk about here is there's lots of right ways to express an idea or something you're passionate about. Why not find one of those that's going to serve a buyer need, that's going to bring eyeballs to someone who's looking for those eyeballs? You can do that just as easily as a more personal version that no one wants to see. Why not do a version that people want to see? I'm not saying everyone's personal version no one wants to see, but a lot of times people not just here in America, everywhere, are really concerned about what they want to make as opposed to what other people want to buy and what other people want to see. And some of that comes from what you hear about filmmakers like our speaker yesterday, James Cameron, who wants to make the things he wants to make, and he now gets to do that. But James Cameron also wrote Piranha 2 for Roger Corman, okay? He wasn't always the James Cameron we know today. You have to start to fulfill needs, and then you can get to a place of more creative independence. That said, I want to encourage you to create content that that satisfies your need for creative expression as well as satisfying a buyer's need for what kind of content they want. So let's talk about the unscripted space, which is really what I want to emphasize today. There's so much opportunity here, but a lot of people think of certain kinds of unscripted shows like these. I'm not saying these are good shows or bad shows. These are largely popular shows. One of these is not a real show. Who can name it? Halitosis Island is not a show yet. I hope to make it someday. But all these other shows are real shows, and most of them are monstrous hits, and most of them are varying degrees on the more commercial, more exploitive, dare I say, end of the reality spectrum. Some of them, like Wife Swap, you could make a case for that being a social experiment. Some of them, like Survivor, is a social experiment and a really well-done drama. Love is Blind is a social experiment and an interesting take on romance, although heavily, heavily produced. I forgot to put F-Boy Island that should have been there with all the other island shows. But these are all shows that I think many of you are familiar with in some form or another. But before you say, I don't want to make shows like those and in the unscripted space, look at these shows. Sorry. I just was in Japan and have Russian volcano ash in my lungs that I'm trying to get rid of, so I'm going to croak up occasionally. These are all unscripted shows that I think have more worthiness. No reservations. I think all of us have loved over the years to see Anthony Bourdain and how he travels. Love on the Spectrum is a beautiful show. If anyone has not seen Wrestlers on Netflix, it's amazing, and I highly recommend it. We'll talk about that more later. Chef's Table is, of course, a beautifully done show that is the series version of Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Marie Kondo, How to Build a Sex Room. I know you've all seen that, but it's a very sex-positive, open show in which people have great conversations. I did a show that we shot the first episode of in Rotorua called Never Say Never with Jeff Jenkins. It's a travel adventure show with a man who's black and 200 kilos, and he doesn't see a lot of people like him on the road. So it dealt with travel and adventure, but a lot of body image and body positive kinds of things that other shows had not done. Amazing Race was mentioned, which a lot of people say is the show they'd like to be on. Trust me, you do not. RuPaul's Drag Race. After Amazing Race won 10 Emmys, RuPaul's Drag Race started winning them. These are like the classy shows. British baking shows, fantastic. Full Bloom, Lego Masters, the artistic shows. My Red Herring, Elon Musk, Marriage Counselor, I'm working on that one. And who here has seen The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning? It's a wonderful guilty pleasure. My other favorite one these days is It Cake? Anyone here see Is It Cake? Damn, is that show fun. All right, so what about you? There must be something on these last two slides that speaks to you. That's the kind of show that you want to make. So I urge you to lean into that. These are all shows that have audiences that are popular. What can you make that is, you don't have to make a show that's like that, but you feel that speaks to the same audience or might draw some of the same viewers. always, whenever you're developing a show of your own, think in terms of audience. Who's going to watch this, okay? And where can you see this screening or airing? What local outlet as well as what international outlet can you see this potentially airing at? You don't have to see something just like it, but, you know, Lifetime likes Dance Moms, and they want other multi-generational, overly dramatic, overproduced reality shows. Like, that's one kind of buyer. Netflix is trying to do the super slick and clean and classic, like Chef's Table was the poster child for that, but even Is It Cake is sort of done in that very Netflix slick way. So think about where you could see it. And I'm going to give you some brainstorming ideas of some unscripted genres you might want to explore through a slightly different lens than you may have done it before, more through the content creator's lens. So a lot of us like to make shows that feel authentic. Okay, we don't like the bullshit that's fake and produced on a lot of shows. We want things that feel real. I used to do a lot of shows that were heavily produced. And in more recent years, I've been doing a lot of work for Nat Geo, and I really enjoy the fact that, yeah, I have to do some producing. I have to make sure Gordon's going to be in the right place at the right time. But what happens in that scene, I don't know until it goes on tape. It's anything goes. And I love that aspect of making documentaries and documentary series, is when you really don't know what will happen next. So authentic shows, well, true crime, there's always a voracious appetite for it. Nationally, internationally, there's always buyers for true crime. There's entire networks dedicated to it in the U.S. And with Max incoming here, they're going to get the Discovery platforms, which include ID, which is all crime all the time. I'm presuming that Max will eventually evolve into the sort of Discovery tiles of TLC and ID and Discovery and that sort of thing. I am a huge fan of subcultures, and I urge you to look to this as being a world to dig into. They give you a window into a secret world. Often they take the form of OcuSoaps or workplace-based follow docs. There's another name for follow docs here. I'm trying to remember what it is. I'm still learning the local lingo. And anyway, there's a lot of kinds of shows that can be authentic and that really can feed into that desire to do something that feels real. I was just watching Mer People on Netflix. I mean, that's kind of a weird subculture show that Cynthia Wade did, who's a documentary filmmaker. I'm sure there's a lot of produced stuff in it, but there's also a lot of authentic stuff in it. Some buyers will value authenticity more than others. Like Nat Geo, I have a research team that goes over all my shows to make sure we have factual accuracy. Trust me, TLC does not, okay? So, but I think what they all want is they all want stakes. In an authentic show, the stakes have to be authentic, they have to be real, there has to be something that you're building up to that has meaning and value and gives you momentum till the end of the episodes. That's one of the most important things of those kinds of shows. Now, some of us prefer or also like to make audacious shows, okay? We like to elicit a reaction from people in whatever form it might take. Social experiments are one of my favorites. I did one of the very early social experiment shows in America called Amish in the City. I had seen a documentary called Devil's Playground about the Amish tradition of Rumspringa. And what I learned from that was Rumspringa, which was the time when Amish kids could decide whether they wanted to be Amish or not, was bullshit because they weren't given the tools to explore the world. They went to a trailer a mile away from their house until somebody got knocked up, and then they moved back in with their parents and became Amish. It was not a true choice. And I love the idea of Amish people actually being able to see what the rest of the world was like and making a choice. And so we brought 5 Amish young people to LA and moved them in with 5 club kids, and they and waited to see what happened, and no one was as surprised as we were. So I love social experiments or anything that asks a big what-if question, and I'm always on the lookout for them, and I think most buyers, like Nick here, would love a great social experiment to put on the air. Creative competition shows also have a level of audacity. and help us look at things like knife forging, forged in fire, drag fashion, cake art in ways we never would have seen, and take them to wild extremes. Full Bloom, the flower arranging show, Blown Away, the gas blowing show, etc. And sometimes these shows create controversy, also known as publicity. Now, other people want just to be entertaining shows. They just want shows that people want to watch. They want comfort shows. They want shows that are fun. And they want to engage people through humor and emotion and big ideas and big characters. And they don't care about critical response so much or getting a reaction out of people so much as they just want people to enjoy them and want more. And typically these types of shows are built around big, unforgettable characters. I mean, most shows are, to be honest, but especially these types of shows, people come back for the characters again and again. I cannot emphasize enough the value of building shows around characters, because your broadcaster, telecaster, streamer can market those characters. They can put them on talk shows. They can use their social media accounts. They can put them on billboards. It's really helpful. And building shows around big ideas is tough. You generally need an IP like Legos to build them around them. That's why there's a Hot Wheels show now. Barbie has unleashed her Mattel army on everyone. And the key, I think, for these kinds of entertaining shows is they have to appeal to a lot of people. They can't feel overly male or overly female or overly old or overly young. It's called broadcasting, not narrowcasting. And the holy grail is to find shows that are a triple threat. I'm using my last two of authenticity, audaciousness, and entertaining, like Wrestlers, which I will mention again because I think it's very well done. And Wrestlers is very well produced because they went out of their way to have strong male and female characters. I mean, when you look at Wrestlers, it's a male version of Mer People. These are both shows with people who have made a lot of bad decisions. But we don't make fun of them. We celebrate them, and we let their decisions and their freak flag fly in these shows. When you can find characters like that, it's gold. This gets into the fact that we all want to be appreciated, and we want people to watch our shows. We don't want to make some show and we spend years on it, months or years, and nobody watches it. And what's great is when you keep in touch with that and remember that you want eyeballs, you're thinking in terms of viewers. And that's what buyers want you to do, is think in terms of viewers and present a show that they can bring viewers to. So I always suggest that people pay attention to the shows that people are talking about, okay? There's a lot of talk about traitors right now in the sort of unscripted competition space right now. People are just buzzing about it. And, you know, SPP has that format, and All 3 has that format, and they're doing it all over the world. And it's, what is it about that format that people are responding to? Those are the questions I ask myself when I'm putting shows together. You don't have to make a show like these necessarily, but try to see what people are responding to. For a long time, people were responding to with unscripted shows that you never knew what would happen. In the first Survivor, the villain won. That blew everyone away. No one saw that coming. And then networks got their hands on them in the US, and the Bravos of the world started demanding scripts before you would go out and shoot unscripted shows, and it got on the overproduced side. And I think there's more of a reaction against that now, and there's a lot more demand for doc-series than there ever has been. So a few unscripted pro tips. No one buys ideas in the unscripted world. They've all been pitched over and over. You may think your idea is unique, but if you come in with just an idea, you're pretty much doomed. I know that's a gross overstatement to some degree, but it really isn't. People sometimes will buy ideas from people like me who have for 30 years been executing shows, and they believe I have the ability to do it. But in general, it's tough for me, and it's going to be really tough for other people who have made less successful shows to do that. So when possible, attach an asset, Attach something that you can own legal rights to, that Karen Sowich can help you acquire and own exclusive rights to, and then you walk in with something, and then even if people don't want you, they want what you have. So that could be a great piece of talent that you discover that you've attached to your show. It could be an underlying book. I've done a lot of work with the Freakonomics guys just because I think that it's a book people have heard of. And when I walk in and say, the Freakonomics guys endorse this as a social experiment that they think is worthy of one of their studies, it sort of means something. But you want to walk in with something of substance that's not just your brain. It's usually just not enough, at least to one of the buyers I'm used to dealing with. Also, roll up your sleeves and fully flesh out the idea, and don't think, well, it's going to be hard to sell and it may not sell anyway, so I'm going to do 10 ideas and do a half-assed job of them. If you go in and get an audience with a buyer, you want to be able to answer all the questions they have and have a fully fledged idea so that you can express your concept knowingly and clearly be the person who can execute that. And then the other pro tip is listen and be open to feedback, okay? None of us are geniuses. It's a collaborative medium. If Nick tells you this would be great for Sky if you would make this one change, don't say, screw you, Nick, I'm not making any changes to my beautiful artwork. Say, do tell me more, Nick. What can I do about that? All right, so that's kind of the content part. These are some of the kinds of shows that you might want to start to think about, and you might want to see what in your world coincides with some of those worlds that I've sort of mentioned there. And now we're going to talk about the other side. We're going to talk about the buyers a little bit more and how to service them. I hope everyone appreciates the Wes Anderson as art and Barbie as commerce thing. They're both, but. So the buyers are not soulless monsters who want to crush your creative vision, much as it may feel like that sometimes. They're not like the Rancor pit monster and they are just humans who are trying to do their jobs, and more so in the US, trying to save their jobs. And to sell to them, you need to know the marketplace you're selling into, and you need to know what each of the buyers wants, okay? And things like SPADA are great for hearing directly from the buyers what they want. And one of the most prescient things that I heard yesterday was this notion of we're trying to look to what will work in 12 to 18 months. Because that's what you have to think about, is what's on the air now is not what they want for the next go-round. They want the next big thing. So listen to, at places like SPADA, listen to what your buyers say, because that's valuable. Obviously, if you are lucky enough to get in a room with one or do a speed pitch with a buyer, take notes, keep track of it, and also track how it changes, because it always changes. So how do we know what they want other than events like this where we hear it directly from them? Well, pay attention to current hits. You know, I mentioned the traders. What's working for each buyer? It's a great thing to know going into a meeting with a buyer what their most successful show is, but to also ask them, yeah, I know that your most successful show is this, but what's the one you're most excited about now? Like, what are they talking about? But if someone's got a hit, you might be able to sell something that drafts off the hit status of that show with another buyer, because buyers tend to have FOMO. If someone has the traders, somebody else wants their version of that will draw a lot of those same people often. If it hits their demo, because all buyers have a target demographic, and they are all too happy to share with you what that demo is. You just have to ask. So often you have to think about how streaming buyers need subscribers, new subscribers, and they want to retain subscribers. And linear buyers want appointment viewing so they can satisfy advertisers. And these create some kind of interesting mandates that you hear about from the buyers themselves, or from agents, or from other producers who know about them. The one I'll never forget is I got a mandate that Amazon was looking for shows that were targeted at black women 18 to 24. And they were taking no other pitches other than shows that hit that target for like 2 months. Now, you have to try to figure out, instead of saying, Amazon's nuts. That's dumb of them. Think about what they're thinking about. Amazon's looking at their numbers and saying, we're in the package shipping business. People who aren't subscribing to Amazon Prime for the programming. They're subscribing because they get free 2-day shipping, except for in New Zealand, on their packages. And so who are not signing up for that? Who's not getting a lot of packages? Who's not shipping enough? It turns out that demo was 18 to 24-year-old black women, and they tried a bunch of programming, and I did not pitch during that time. I didn't have anything in that demo, but that's a really narrow view of it. But another buyer might be saying, we're really looking strongly at kids programming. Our kids programming slate is really weak right now. Or we're finding that we're appealing to a lot of women, but they're over a certain age group. We want to get younger, so multi-generational female shows are what we're looking for. When you can get that kind of input, that is gold. So how do you find out what the buyers want? Well, you ask them. You read the trades or the various sources of input, show tools, and the things that you've got that give you that information. And you share information with your colleagues. I mean, we're in competition, but we're not. We're all trying to succeed together. So sometimes someone will call me and say, what do you know about what Netflix is looking for right now? And I'll say, I know they're not looking for food. And they'll say, shit, I had a food show. Not right now for Netflix. So sharing information can be very, very useful for that kind of thing. What you want versus what you want to make, the Nick Cage lesson. So Nick Cage used to only make the kind of films that he wanted to make, and then Nick Cage got into a lot of tax debt and had to make anything that was put in front of him. None of us want to be in that situation where we have to make, or we have to take what the only job being offered to us. We have to make the only show that we need to. You want to be able to be flexible and have your show be available in a lot of different ways to a lot of people. I like to think that most ideas can be expressed in many ways. There's not just one right way. So you can spin your idea often to suit a specific buyer. So of the U.S. broadcast networks, most of them want wide viewership, but Fox is younger, and ABC is more female. NBC is more affluent, and CBS just wants everybody, and they're older typically. So when I pitch those 4 broadcast networks, I can pitch the same show to them in a different way that appeals to their skew on the demographic. Sometimes it's harder when you get into cable or streamers that are more gender inequity driven. Lifetime is a very female network. They're not really caring or tracking male viewers that much. Just like History is a very male viewing network. I'm using old school cable terms because everybody's going to be a streaming tile soon, and it'll all make sense still, and they'll still have those same kind of audiences that follow them. So be prepared to skew your pitch, not just so that it's to the buyer in terms of what's working for them programming-wise, but also to their demographic based on what you see on their current roster. Present a version of your show that you want to make that also fills that need. You can do both. Don't just be, this is what I want to do. Have it serve the need as well, and listen to feedback. I find there's a lot of what was it in one of the sessions yesterday? Someone had the person just got notes and they were given the finger. Was that yours or was that a different? No, right. And it is all of us have that our hair goes back on our neck when we get the notes. But the fact is, if you have a great network executive, they save you from yourself and they help manage their bosses so you make their bosses happy. So it's really good when you can forge those kinds of relationships and not see them as other or the enemy, or that their feedback doesn't have meaning. I'm having an argument right now, like literally on text right before this session, with my Nat Geo exec, who's wonderful and a great exec, and I love her, and I've worked with her for 4 seasons of Uncharted. So, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's Gordon uses a lot of profanity. Nobody cares. He's free spoken, and he'll refer to women as girl sometimes. And it's part of his vernacular, and he'll say it to someone who's a Michelin-starred chef who he respects, and Gordon's a runaway pony, and you have to live with some of his idiosyncrasies, and you have to realize he doesn't mean it in a diminutive or an insulting way. It's just him being familiar. He refers to people in all sorts of ways, like, John, you idiot. He refers to me sometimes. But there was some sensitivity from some people at Nat Geo where he referred to a older black woman as girl, and that was seen by some people as offensive. And I was asked to come up with an edit fix so he did not do that. And I, just to her, said, are we going to go back and change every time he says girl to all of our episodes, or are we really going to treat this as an isolated episode? And she said, it's really this one that caused standards to have a reaction. But she's saving me from myself. She's saying people at Nat Geo were uncomfortable with this, and we want them to be comfortable. That's just something recent, but this happens all the time, and it'll happen to you when you work with your buyers. If you forge a good, strong relationship, they will help you. And that starts from the pitch. So if you pitch Nick, and sorry to pick on you, but you're in the front row. If you pitch Nick, and he's saying that he needs to sell his team this project, you need to make this skew more female, or whatever he gives you. Don't just say, I don't care what he says. He wants success as well. And it's very important to work with your buyers in a collaborative way like that so that you can share that success together. But also you can use the Jedi mind trick and convince them that these are the droids they're looking for. So if you come in prepared and you come in to see a buyer and you know they don't really have anything like this and they're not really looking for something like this, you can come up with ways by saying, well, really, Traders is working for you, and this is kind of like Traders because it has the kind of subversive undertones that it has. You come up with a spin and ammo that person can maybe look at their own needs in a different light, or look at your show in a different way they might not otherwise. It doesn't usually work on the fly. You have to come to the meeting prepared to use the Jedi mind trick, but if you master it, it's a wonderful tool. And I know I've said this like 3 times to listen and be flexible, but honestly, you just say yes to the universe, and then once they buy the show, there will be lots more discussions, and you can try and bend the show more to the one you wanted to make, to the extent that Nick allows that. All right, so we're getting close to question time, so if you have questions, start to think of them, because otherwise Mark's going to have to come up with a whole bunch of questions. Are you ready, Mark, in case no one has any questions? Okay, good. All right, so here are some more pro tips for you. I am a big believer of having a robust development slate, whether you are a human or a company, whether you are Greenstone or whether you are Rachel Davies, no matter who you are, you must have a diverse development slate, because development has weird cycles, and sometimes they get stuck in legal for 6 months, like the deal I just did with someone in this room, who will remain Rachel Anthony. And sometimes, the talent's unavailable, like it's Gordon Ramsay. He's doing 10 other shows. I have to wait for him. So you don't want to be a one-trick pony who's just got this one show you're trying to do, because you will spend all your time waiting and it will drive you crazy and you will start to look desperate. And I don't know what it's like here yet, but Hollywood smells desperation and is it is a repellent like you've never seen. People want people who seem unavailable and unattainable, just like dating. You want someone who you can't have. That's what it's like when you're pitching in Hollywood. So you want to have a slate of 10 or 12 projects, all of which you have in your hopper that you're getting going. And so that if suddenly you're doing a show about fashion and no one wants fashion and it's on the outs right now, you've got a food show that you can go to, or you've got a docu-series of some kind. Develop around assets. I know I said it before, it's because it's important. I am telling you, I've taught multiple seminars since I've been here in New Zealand, and I've told everyone to bring assets, and some people do and some people don't, and it's often the difference between selling a show and not selling a show. An asset can be anything you can acquire the exclusive legal rights to, just to be clear. It can be a book, it can be a graphic novel, it can be a website, it can be... I once sold a show based on a Pew Research study, which I did not have the rights to, but used it as the basis for selling the show. It's and then the other thing is when you're developing, you want to think in terms of buyers, whether you're trying to pitch in New Zealand or you're trying to pitch to streamers or you're trying to pitch to U.S. networks. You always want to think of 3 buyers who might buy this. It really helps because, it may be that you reach out to TVNZ and to 3 and to Sky, and 3 says, we have no more money for the rest of the year. Or Sky says, we're not doing food shows, and yours is a food show. There may be a reason why the doors close before you even get in the door, and you spent all this time and money developing this show. So you always want to have multiple buyers who could be interested before you actually invest your time and money. Another pro tip. Buyers do not want features or one-offs. Maybe a 3 or 4 part limited series, but there are real reasons for this. It's not like they don't like them creatively. By the way, the example I'm using here is the Pigeon Tunnel. Anyone here see the Pigeon Tunnel? Fascinating film. It is a one-off. But if you're Errol Morris and Apple gives you what I can only assume was a shitload of money to do it, you can do a one-off. You have to, but most of us are not, well, nobody here is Errol Morris. So most buyers are going to hopefully invest marketing and advertising dollars in your project, and they want that to pay off. It's very, very difficult to do that with a one-off. Movie people do it in a different way, and they're in the one-off business, but even they want sequels and spin-offs and remakes and everything. But for the TV business, your buyer wants to be able to capitalize on a hit. And if you have an idea for a feature doc, and a lot of these lessons apply to scripted as well, see if you can do it as a series instead. And if you want to know more about that, next weekend I'm doing a seminar for WIFT that deals with that very subject, converting doc feature ideas into doc series. And I invite you to attend it. We did it in Auckland, and it sold out, and we had a great time. So we're doing it in Wellington. So if you live here, you should come to it. And if you don't live here, it's cheap and you can fly down for the day. It's just one day. All right, here's another pro tip. Partner with the fabulous New Zealand-based companies, if you're not already one of them, because they want to sell to international buyers as well, okay? And they want to keep their development slate fresh. And many of them are part of international consortiums of various shapes and sizes, such as, obviously, Warner New Zealand is part of Warner Brothers, and Screen Time is part of Bonjay, and South Pacific is part of all 3, and Greenstone is part of CJZ, and all of these people have different entities that they work with. So if you have an idea that's not just New Zealand-centric and that could work globally, there might be interest from any or all of these buyers here that are right down the block if you live in Auckland. So consider that. They can tell you what their needs are as well. And going into a room with a big brother, or more likely in Auckland, big sister partner, is going to be really, it's really going to improve your chances of a sell, because Nick is more comfortable handing a few $1 million to Rachel Anthony than he is to someone he's never met before. So it's those are just good rules of thumb to do. And with that, are there any questions?
Let's put our hands together for Jon.
Thank you.
Nick, buy my show. Did that work?
These are the droids you're looking for.
Might have to go back to the drawing board on that one. I just have a couple of questions to get us started. I'm sure there's plenty in the room. without cannibalising your upcoming WIFT talk, there will be a lot of people in this room who are documentary filmmakers, who work in long form, who have great ideas and might be thinking about turning that to the series, into a series. What are just a couple of things for them to think about if they're thinking along that track?
Well, you don't want to stretch your content too thinly, but you do want to think in terms of more is generally better. I mean, sometimes a buyer will say, we'd love something that could start out as 3 but could expand or whatever, but Gwen and I were working on a project and there were sort of 3 parts and it wasn't really conducive to getting, we ended up with 3 or 4? 4. We ended up with 4, but that was really as much as you could stretch it. And I think that 6 is a really good number for for the Netflixes of the world. They don't really want 4s usually. And so I think trying to come up with something that could have enough episodes so that in success they've got some continuing interest. And also, what's the plan for season 2? You might be doing, one of the great examples when people saw Lost, they were trying to figure out how are they ever going to do another season of this? And when you have a hit, they find a way. There was a Tiger King 2. It was terrible, but there was a Tiger King 2 because it was such a big hit. So I think trying to think in terms of something with some longevity is a good idea. And also, once again, the universal appeal idea. How can you open it up? There have been a lot of shows that have dealt with wrestling. I'm going to keep going back to wrestlers just because I think it's a great example of they had great characters. They made a point of finding great male and female characters and of making us care about them and not making fun of them. Tone was very important with that. And the guy who did that did Cheer, so he had some experience doing that. You want to look at what works with other shows as well. I'm working on a feature documentary right now, which is contrary to everything I believe in, but some friends are doing it and I'm helping. And I'm telling them all to watch the Beckham 4-part series, which I think is remarkably well done, and looking at how they use scene work. So today's documentaries are not just talking heads and archival. You want to see people interacting in an organic way. How do you include that? So I think paying attention to modern trends and what's working, what was once an observational documentary which has no producer hands in it, there's producer hands on everything now. It's just a matter of whether you can see them or not. If you can make it invisible to the audience, that's the goal. So those are just a few thoughts about it. Yes, Karen? Horses? That's a funny, I will tell you this because my frequent collaborator in America on doc stuff, Sharon Lease, who just won an Emmy for Flag Makers, has been trying to do a horse show for years. And the conventional wisdom of buyers, and it's one of those things where until someone has a hit horse show, it's going to hold, is horses are affluent, and affluent people don't have much time to watch TV, so they don't have enough eyeballs for a show about horses. We don't have the same connections. They're not as universal as dogs and cats. That is the, when I say prevailing wisdom, I'm not even saying it's wisdom, but you can't even get into the room and pitch a horse show. Good question, though.
Yeah, good question.
I love questions that I actually know the answer to.
Obviously, most people in this room are making content or wanting to make content for a New Zealand audience. A lot of what you've been talking about is pitching to internationals or making work that will travel. New Zealand's in an unlikely position where we're an English-speaking country. We are competing with America and the UK in terms of that. What would your advice be to people who are wanting to make work that will travel, but with a particular New Zealand lens?
Well, first of all, I am sure that the New Zealand buyers, even though they know that access to the SPIG and New Zealand on air money and that sort of thing really helps these projects, do not mind if these projects adhere to many of the things here and get a lot of interest and are self-marketing and attract a lot of eyeballs. They would love that. So all of these lessons, I think, can apply to content that is done locally. There is this sort of sense of, is the project worthy enough to get the public support, which which I have not yet unlocked and I'm still learning about. But there's no reason you can't tick those boxes and also make a show that is highly entertaining, marketable, and can draw a huge audience. So I think these are good rules of thumb for anything. I think getting a show that's made in New Zealand that will travel, well, as you know, Mark, my goal is to live and work in New Zealand and try to make shows here that are for an international audience. That's my entire business plan. Will I be successful at it? I just got here. Time will tell. But I think that New Zealand provides a beautiful backdrop. So one of the kinds of shows I'm trying to do are bringing people from America and other places to New Zealand to do a show with New Zealand as a setting, both for scripted and unscripted. Another thing to do is find great characters that live in New Zealand, whether they're expats or they are locals, and build shows around them. But they are competing with the characters that are already on these other networks. So the bar is very high for characters, but you can find them. And I'm working with a couple of local producers who have found good talent to do just that. Always bet on talent. I mean, to my mind, if you can find someone who is great on screen, and here, of course, you've got your Taikas and your Lucys and your Reeses, and the fact that we know them all by first name means there's not enough of them. But there's other ones that haven't been discovered yet that I think that could be brought to the global stage. I've had conversations with some of the people in the room about some of these people, and I think character is always the best way to take a show and make it go broad, because you can shoot tape with them, and the buyer can see the show in them. If it's somebody who they see a show in, doesn't matter that they have an accent. Language barriers can be tricky, but it's interesting. I was talking to the woman yesterday from Maori, and she said, I'm doing shows for Nat Geo, and they're not afraid of subtitles, and we use them all the time, and we shoot all over the world. And Gordon can swear in many different languages. It's not a problem for him.
That actually leads to my next question, which was about cultural specificity. We've heard over the last couple of days people talking about to subtitle or not subtitle, distributors who are not interested in Māori words or te reo. I noticed with Jeff Jenkins too, you really leaned into that for that first episode that you shot in Rotorua and around the Bay of Plenty. What would your advice be again to people who are wanting to make sure that culturally their story is well represented, and in your experience, are buyers or what buyers are looking for that?
Well, I learned an important lesson in the early days of Big Brother, of all things, with that, which is the Big Brother house. I did the second through the fourth seasons in America, and it was very different than the first season and how it's done everywhere else in the world. But they thought they could whisper, and we could not broadcast it if they whispered things. And we just subtitled it, and we started subtitling things that we weren't even sure we needed to, because the microphones were so good they could pick it up because people loved it. They felt like they were getting secret information or insight. And I think that it's like that as well. I used it for a house flipping show. Actually, I did a show, totally a piece of commerce, not a piece of art, about flipping houses in Las Vegas. And the presenter is a total asshole, and he was mean to his team, all of whom were undocumented Latino workers. So I just started shooting stuff of them talking shit about him behind his back and subtitling in Spanish. And I got him to play off of that, like being the fool, and so that played well. Now what we do with Uncharted is simply that when things are said in another language, we have someone on screen with them doing the translations. So instead of it just being subtitled, you set up that you've got an on-camera translator. They translate the first thing on screen, and then you could have the person speak and have it subtitled and have Gordon respond in English, and we understand that the translator is filling the gap, and we don't have to. We create a shorthand in that way. And the scenes flow and they feel really authentic, and you can also just jump in with the translator speaking English from time to time, or having them translate Gordon a little, whatever it takes to make it feel right. There's lots of ways to make subtitles work and make people not afraid of them. The show that Mark's referring to, which is available right now on Disney Plus, called Never Say Never with Jeff Jenkins, the large traveler, we did shoot the first episode in Rotorua, and our main contributor was Maori, and he it was not the intention, but he wanted Jeff to find his pepeha, and that became the theme of the whole episode. And we just let the Maori flow, and Nat Geo completely leaned into it, and we subtitled things, and we had prayers, and sometimes we had to shorten the prayers a little bit, which was delicate, but we actually had representatives who were helping make sure we weren't doing it in a way that was disrespectful, and it worked. So sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I think that it's a different world and it's not as close to subtitles. You just have to make it happen in a way that it doesn't drag your storytelling to a screeching halt.
Yeah, nice. I also personally, I love the way Casketeers have used Te Reo as well, to really help, and that's helped with the international market too. Questions from the audience?
Yes.
Celia, yeah.
That's easy. The microphone's right here. Thank you, John. I was just wondering, how can New Zealand producers pitch to networks? Do they have to go through an EP, or I imagine it's pretty closed because we're unknown?
Well, that's a very good question. It's not as closed as you might think. All of the American buyers want desperately to save their jobs, and they're constantly in jeopardy. It's a lot of turnover that takes place. And there's also lots of multiple levels of executives. So it's not that hard, especially to get a junior executive in the room, and they have to sell it up to their boss, which is why I always think selling with tape is a good idea, because you won't be with them when they sell it to their boss. So if they can show them the tape, that really helps communicate the idea. It also helps you distill your idea down to a 3 or 4 minute tape, always under 4. It used to be under 5, now under 3.5 most of the time. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can go across the water and go to Real Screen or one of those big conferences. You can make friends with people who have access to those buyers, such as the New Zealand companies I mentioned, such as people like me, such as friends you might make in America who, from contacts that you have there, are just meeting people through social media and everything else, such as sometimes agents can be helpful. It depends on, you just have to create a cocoon of joyful collaboration around yourself. And here's the thing is, I love to do people favors, because then people don't like to be in debt, so they want to find a favor they can do for you. So I always try to connect people. There's two people in this room who I connected to. I did not think I was the right partner for it. I connected them to someone who I think is, and I think they're making a deal and are going to have a monster hit in America. I'm not saying who it is, because you'll ask them for a job. And it's too early for that. But I think that it's not as unattainable as you might think. The bigger problem is coming up with content that will sell. That's the big problem. And that will sell on that stage where there is so much competition. Because when I hear all this talk for, only 33% of the people applying to on-air get funded, I'm thinking, you have any idea how many people are pitching these networks in America? It's everyone and their mother wants to be a producer there, and it's crazy. It's very competitive. But you have an accent, and you're forbidden fruit. You're from a faraway land, so you can usually get a meeting when you go there. You can get some attention. There's ways of doing it. I think it's good. I made several trips here before I moved, where I met some of the people that are in this room, and I think it's good to plan yourself a trip to America, to LA, because there's a lot more opportunity there than New York, and just try and get on the books with as many people as you possibly can. Meet with agents, meet with networks, meet with producers, meet with production companies. A great way into the U.S. marketplace is through production companies. I mentioned doing it with production companies here, but some of them a lot of them are really interested in getting outside content, especially with assets attached. There's a couple who run a company called Joke Productions. Her name is Joke and his name is Biagio. And they run a podcast they've done for about 10 years called Producing Unscripted. It's a great podcast if you want to know the U.S. marketplace. And they accept unsolicited pitches. I assume there's something you have to sign. But they take pitches from outside, and I know people who have gotten deals with them, and they have access to the marketplace. They're just one of the most open companies. But there's 150 production companies, 200 production companies in LA, and some of them, the doors are closed, and some of them are looking for content and open for business. So all you need to do is look at who's the production company at the end of a show that's an American show that's shown here or on Netflix or on any of these other networks. Track those people down and see if you can develop a relationship, because coming from a faraway land is attractive. It's like you might have a format that they might want. Everyone wants formats, you know? You might have access to talent they want. So people are interested, a lot more interested than if someone contacts them from somewhere in America saying, I want to pitch you something. Thank you all very much. See you around.
Thank you to Jon.